our other personalities we don't like anymore. We have one more storyteller. We love her so much. She is an improviser. She is my neighbor up in Highland Park. She loves what she does so much. She lived in Vegas for a little bit, so she'll show you how to walk like a showgirl. And more importantly, she's a writer and storyteller. Please welcome Liz Allen.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Let's have a round of applause for Louder Than a Mom, which is amazing. Every night I'm here, I'm blown away. Seriously, this is an honor to be here. So, when I went to write the story for tonight, my first instinct was, well, it's about time. Why don't you write about your marriage? I don't really share many stories about my marriage and our marriage. That's a lot. I just start over and our marriage, honey. Okay, so nothing was really inspiring me about our marriage, and it's not that I'm not proud of what we've created together, the time we've spent together. We recently, this week, had a 23rd anniversary. Right, so I mean, there's some stories that I could tell, but I just wasn't feeling inspired. So I said to myself, I'm gonna look for a sign of what story I'll tell tonight. I'll look for a sign. So I'm walking down Wells Street, and at the base of a tree, very clearly, like right in front of me, boom, is an orange and white knit hat. And across the rim of this hat is written the word Burton, B-U-R-T-O-N. And I said, great, that is such a clear sign. My grandmother's first husband was named John Sibley Burton, okay? And she had a daughter who was my mother's half-sister, and her name was Judy Burton, and we called her Aunt Judy Burton. And I was like, this is my story, Aunt Judy Burton. She was married to 8 people that we know of. She got married 8 times. Now here's what's funny, my sister thinks it's 5. We don't know. My aunt has passed, so has my mother, so I can't clarify it. We all agree though that at one point she married a man while he was in prison. And she downplayed it because he was a white-collar criminal. And she said we were uptight about it. And one Christmas she visited from Florida to North Carolina, and she drove up from Florida, and she made us put Christmas presents under the tree for her husband in jail. So when she went back to Florida, she would give him those presents. Now that's all I've got to say about Aunt Judy Burton. So then I thought maybe I'm misinterpreting the sign. So I went back and I thought, well, it's just a hat. How about be inspired that it's a hat? Hat made me think of being at the beach a lot with my parents. My parents' marriage was miserable. It's a poster child of what never to do under any circumstance. And they stayed married 42 years. But what's interesting, I know. My dad ended up leaving my mother after 42 years for a younger woman, and my mom and this woman threw eggs at one another's cars. Marriage is that they only got along when they were putting a boat into the water. And I'm not kidding, it's that specific. We would go to the coast of North Carolina. And you know, their life wasn't bickering. It was deep psychological opposition to one another. That was the misery of their marriage. But when we would go to the beach and we'd have we had this little day sailor, it's called a Flying Scot, if there's any sailors in the group, this little Flying Scot, and we would drive to the beach, and without speaking, in one moment of ensembleness, my parents would switch drivers. My mom would get behind the wheel of the station wagon, my dad would get out, and he'd guide the boat into the water with simple, respectful instructions. And then that was it. As soon as we got on the boat, the marriage was over. But what it taught me was that romantic love should have opposition. It should be an oppositional event. It should last forever and end with egg throwing. But then I thought, well, I don't really have anything else to say about my parents' marriage. That says it all. So I called my friend and I said, I need some help with this story I'm telling at Louder Than a Mom that I respect so much. And my friend Tammy said, the sign of the hat that was written Burton is a sign. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think so. And she said, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton both married each other, just like you and your husband, Doug. So that is the story I'm supposed to tell tonight. I just misinterpreted the sign. My husband and I got married in 1992, then we got divorced in 1995. I'll tell you why. It's me. The minute the little bit of opposition showed, the minute a little bit of negotiation showed, I fled. I was like, I'm out. And I said to him one Sunday, and he's over there, so you can verify this later with him if you care to. I said to him, let's get a divorce. And he said, fine. And I said, fine. And he said, fine. And we weren't that young. I think we were 30, 31. We can't blame it on youthful ignorance. Like, that's old enough to know something. I mean, I'd like to think I know more, but probably not. So we sort of stubborned each other into a divorce. Doug believes and still believed then and still believes the law is for the people. So he went to the Harold Washington Library and printed out the forms to get a divorce because he doesn't think you need a lawyer pretty much ever. That's his opinion on the law. So we go in front of the judge, and she gets angry because we don't know procedure. So she tells us to come back at 4 p.m. We went and had a lovely lunch. We come back, we play hangman in the back of the courtroom until the judge calls us up again. We've learned the procedure a little better, and she says to us, are you too sure about this divorce? And I thought, yeah. And Doug's like, yeah, we're sure. And he walked away, went to the L, I went to the bus, and I was flooded with a feeling I now know is deep oceanic regret. But I didn't know it at the time. We stay apart. We have other relationships. We're very polite. We share some cats, custody of cats. And then one day, out of the blue in 1998, I'm on the purple line, which I'm never on, and Doug taps my shoulder. And he says, Liz, what are you doing here? And I was like, what are you doing here? Why are you on the purple line? We don't spend much time in Evanston. He was for work. I was visiting friends. And he said, want to go to lunch? I said, sure. So we went to lunch. We talked for 3 hours. We stayed. We went to dinner. And he drove me home at 10 p.m. that night. And we agreed, this happenstance meeting, we needed to either finish what we didn't finish correctly and nicely and cleanly and honestly, or maybe it wasn't done. We agreed eventually. 2 years later, we got remarried. I know, barf. That's very sweet. So I go to Marshall Field on State Street to get an appropriate second wedding dress, and I pick out this red silk suit, knee length, very appropriate. And the sales clerk says to me, what's the occasion? And I said, well, I'm remarrying my ex-husband. And she looks at me deadpan and goes, I tried that, didn't work. Okay, so what I learned, which I didn't know, is that there's a club. It's a club you're in. When you divorce someone and you remarry them, it's a club. A lot of people are in this club. We had no idea. They come out of the woodwork. I can't tell you how many times people were like, oh, my cousin did that. My neighbor did that. And a lot of famous people, besides Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Judge Judy, believe it or not, she was divorced for like 6 months, and she always says the divorce didn't stick. And then, let's see, well, it doesn't count J-Lo and Ben because they weren't married the first time. Marie Osmond! And speaking of which, I lived in Vegas when she remarried her first husband, and the school my son was at, everyone's like, oh, Marie's just like you. So, I can't really say, I can't share any great wisdom. Some days we are each other's greatest champions, and some days we are each other's greatest anchors. Some days I feel like, yeah, I understand married love, and other days the best I can say is, we're still here. I want to say that I'm proud of us because we've never taken the bait of the cynicism of the sales lady at Marshall Field. I've never become that cynical. I'm not as oppositional as my parents were, and I'm grateful for that. I'm learning. It's a learning process to not be that oppositional. When I came here tonight, I didn't know what my third conclusion was going to be. As Joe Bill mentioned, improvisers, we have to have the third.
Yeah.
I didn't have the third. I was like, how am I going to finish this thing? And then God, Tess, has given me my closer. Thank you for that, which is, in my marriage number 2, I have stood fully in my assignment, and I don't worry about bowing out. Thank you very much.